Let's go to Bama and Tennessee, shall we? Tennessee, hell of a job. Good win from Tennessee, 24-17. Tennessee, they beat the Alabama Crimson Tide. And how about those 3 weeks right after they beat Georgia, who we just saw take down Texas, and then Alabama rolls out. They lose to Vandy. They probably should have lost to South Carolina, and then they lose to Tennessee. So what do we take from this game? What do we take from Bama losing 24-17 on the road to Tennessee? And by the way, like, hey, man, like, I don't know if it was time for the goalposts. That ain't Nick Saban over there. You know what I mean? And by the way, someone needs to teach the kids at Tennessee. By the way, kids, you shouldn't smoke cigars. But if you're going to, you don't light them with matches. Like, there was so much wrong with that. Tennessee, like, come on. Vandy is kicking your butt in celebration. Sorry, but it's true. You don't know how to light your victory cigars. You probably shouldn't storm the field because Saban ain't over there in the first place. And it's like your offense is probably still not good enough. But let's get to it. First thing that we learned from Alabama beating Tennessee, Alabama is not going to the SEC championship game and will not win the SEC. So you can take them out of the equation of potentially getting to Atlanta. There are now 7 teams ahead of Bama in the standings, 7 in Kalen DeBoer's first year. And this is a team that is reeling right now. And you can tell they are reeling. The defense, which I thought was a problem a couple of weeks ago and has played much better. And now the offense is struggling. Milroe, multiple turnovers in all 3 games since that Georgia win. He threw the bad INT in the end zone versus Tennessee. He needs to play better. And the problem is like there's too much pressure on Milroe to be perfect because the team isn't great around him right now. So they don't have enough right now. They really couldn't stop the run, and that was an issue in particular in the second half. And I think that the heat is going to get turned way up on Kalen DeBoer because I don't think people in Tuscaloosa, as much as they will tell you that they kind of understood this, like, no, we get it. Like Nick is leaving and that standard might not be here this year. Then you see the last 3 weeks and you're like, what in the world? We got guys faking jump shots on QB sneaks. And it's like, this ain't it. This is the first time losing 2 games before November since 2007. That's Nick Saban's first year. They only lost 2 regular season games in 4 of Saban's 17 seasons, and they've already got 2 losses in this one. There was another 15 penalties against Tennessee, and now they're the 5th most penalized team in college football. That is staggering. Like, folks, Alabama they're in a tough spot. So now the question is, if they're not going to the SEC championship game, is Alabama going to make the college football playoff in its first expanded year? I told you way back when I said, like, what were the expectations? I told you Kalen DeBoer doesn't have to be Nick Saban, but he can't miss the playoff. He can't miss the playoff. If you miss the first 12-team playoff and you're Alabama with Kalen DeBoer, that's alarm bells in Tuscaloosa. And guess what? I think now, after losing to Tennessee, I think Alabama might control their own destiny to go to the playoff, but only if they win out. 10-2 Alabama with a win over Georgia absolutely gets in. Okay, so they will absolutely go. I think that's 100%, and I think everybody would agree with me. Now, the more tricky question is, does Alabama go to the playoff if they're 9-3? 10-2 in, 9-3. And let's just say, sake of argument, that the loss is LSU. It's at LSU. That's going to be a tough environment. Like, let's just say, sake of argument, okay? 9-3 Alabama with a win over Georgia. Do they go to the playoff? I pause because I think a lot of people would be like, oh, well, yeah, of course. Of course they would. They would have a win over Georgia. I don't think so. I think Alabama has to win out. Think about the number of teams that could still be ahead of them, not just in the country, but even just in the SEC. Okay, so think about this. If they lose to LSU, let's just say, hypothetically, if they lose to LSU and they're 9-3, They lost to Vandy. They lost to Tennessee. They lose to LSU, but they have a win over Georgia. Well, you would at least play out a scenario where Georgia, Texas, probably Texas A&M, LSU almost certainly if you give LSU a win over Bama, and likely Tennessee all have better records than them. All of them have better records than them. That's 5 SEC teams. SEC is not getting 6 teams into the playoff. They're just not. There's just not enough spots, okay? Because all of those teams would have a really good case, a really good taste. That's Georgia, Texas, Texas A&M, LSU, and Tennessee. And in fact, maybe one of those is not going to get in. And they would be ahead of Bama in terms of record. Then that's not even taking into account what's going on around the country. Like, we could easily get a 12-1 Ohio State and Oregon. We could easily get an 11-1 Penn State. We could get a 10-2 Indiana. We could get an 11-1 Notre Dame. We could get a 12-1 both Miami and Clemson. We could get an 11-2 Kansas State. We could get a 12-1 BYU. We could get a 12-1 Iowa State. And all of that is totally outside of Alabama's control. So you heard it here first, hopefully. Alabama 100% in if they win out. And I'm going to say 99.999% sure they're out of the playoff if they lose one more game. 9-3 Alabama is not going to the playoff. 99.9%. Now, they would need major chaos out there. And if chaos starts to unfold, then yeah, maybe, because they would have a win over Georgia. So let's back it down. 99, let's call it 95%. 95%. Tennessee, really quickly, because I don't want to just abandon Tennessee. I just thought it was more interesting talking about Alabama because the loser of that game put themselves really in a precarious spot. Tennessee, here's what my thoughts on Tennessee, and they haven't changed really. Tennessee is elite on defense. They can run the football well, and they really struggle throwing the ball. All right, Nico made a few plays. I thought his plays with his legs were really good. And then when they can get him on the run, when he throws the ball on the run down the field, they get that explosive play. Like that to me is when they're at their best. I'm still a little bit worried for them just because of that lack of passing game. And I can tell you this, the way that Georgia played against Texas, you look ahead and you look at Tennessee has to play Georgia. This Tennessee team is not beating that Georgia team, at least in my estimation right now. I'll be pretty shocked if they beat Georgia in Athens. I think that's November 16th. But if they finish 10-2 with a win over Alabama, then they're absolutely playoff bound, at least in my eyes, pending what's going on in the rest of the country. So to me, Tennessee is still a great bet. I really like a lot of things. Nico has got to clean things up, and I think that we know that. Thank you for watching the Joel Klatt Show YouTube channel. And if you liked this clip, make sure to like it and subscribe to the channel, and you can stay up to date on all of my college football coverage.